Glenn Martens, welcome to SHOWstudios in Fashion. Thank you so much for joining us. Were you ambitious growing up? Do you consider yourself an ambitious person?
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah. But first of all, my father is a judge, so there was a high expectation of success somewhere, somehow. I mean, they don't let you do things like this. So I grew up in a very classic household. My mother's side, my whole family is actually military. My grandfather was a colonel in the Belgian army in the Second World War. So it's an education which is really focused on plan A, plan B, plan C, have everything sorted out, not too much fun. And on top of that, I'm also a Taurus. So I'm very stubborn and directional. So I think ambition is definitely something that was in me since day one. My parents were very strict, so I was allowed to study as much as I wanted at university. But if I failed once, I had to pay it myself. So there was no subventions from the family. So obviously you have to be wise. I came from high school, I did Latin and languages, and I really felt I wasn't going to be a history master. I didn't feel like doing something theoretical. I did have that creative need. But then again, I came from Bruges where there's nothing, there's like really nothing. So I was never confronted with music, art, movies, super classic. So I had to find something to do to open up in the creative world, and I thought interior architecture could have been fun, but it was fun because it's a little bit of artistic expression, but also mathematics, and it has to fit into a structure. So it felt like a really good in between. I graduated at 21, and then I was like, I don't really like to do interior architecture, and then actually I came into fashion by accident, to be honest, because. The Fashion Academy of Antwerp was built by a very famous Belgian architect, Marie-José van Hey. And obviously we studied that building during the architecture classes, interior architecture. So we studied the whole concept or whatever, and that's how I actually discovered Belgium had a Fashion Academy. And I was like, that building looks really beautiful. I would love to spend some time in that building. Voila. I definitely think Bruges has a very big impact on how I see life and how I see creativity, because I like to make total pictures. I like that everything fits within one beautiful story. Then, of course, on top of that, Bruges is a historic city, medieval city. My dad was a very big history freak. And being a judge, he would, of course, oblige us to go to all the museums and whatever, all the cathedrals. And he would actually bring it in a very nice way. He would really bring the whole story of interior quite boring subjects, again, in a very fairy tale way. Like he would really talk about Marie Antoinette as she's like a Disney princess. So as a child, I was completely obsessed by all these figures. And I became actually a bit of a history nerd.
Fashion can be such an insular thing. Do you think that helped you actually, and helps you still in fashion, that you actually you have a different perspective that you've come from?
Yeah, I do think I am a bit alternative to the industry in some kind of way. It took me a lot of time in the Antwerp Academy to actually understand the real fashion, the clothes, the fabrics, because my first focus was about construction. And I think that was a plus point, because at the end of the day, I think now one of my fortes, especially at Y Project, is construction, because I really see garments as constructive buildings. And that probably comes from that very naive moment in the beginning of the Antwerp Academy where I was just there trying to build a house around a human. My grandfather, the colonel in the Belgian army, when I started at the Fashion Academy, he of course was like, what the fuck are you going to do with a fashion degree? And I had it very clearly in mind. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna finish this school, I'm gonna go to Antwerp, I'm probably gonna work at a house or two, and then I'm gonna start my own brand. And my brand will work or not work, and if it doesn't work, that brand will help me get another job. I really already had in mind since school that I was going to become a creative director. So I was very directional. And that's a bit the moment when Jean Paul Gaultier finished, and then I did have this very rational thinking, like I need to do as much as possible to understand this industry. Also because I'm a very, very bad assistant. I'm a horrible assistant, you should never hire me. So the only way how I could actually function is being independent. So after Jean Paul Gaultier, I tried everything. I drew collections for Weekday, I was a consultant for Hugo Boss, I was the assistant of Johan Serfati. So I did a lot of different typology of companies, from high fashion to fast fashion to independent designer. And all of that was really super interesting, super fruitful, and I think that is the biggest asset I have now, is that I did experience many different industries.
Can we talk a bit about that obsession with kind of construction and play?
That came a bit by obligation, to be honest. First of all, I think Y Project was a very junior brand in the way that I was not really ready to be a creative director. I mean, I did work everywhere, but at the end of the day, I was still quite young. And secondly, my CEO, Gilles, never worked in fashion before. He wasn't a fashion CEO. I mean, he did Harvard and he was in informatics or whatever. So we really did everything how we felt it, but there was actually nobody senior in this company. I think that's also, for example, one of the reasons of Y Project, because it felt very natural and it was felt, and we accepted the mistakes, you know, and there was no guideline from something else. So it was a very unique project. But so yeah, Gilles, when he, for example, proposed to do women's wear, I was like, yeah, cool, whatever. I'm always like very happy to go for a new challenge. So we didn't have the budget at all to do men's and women's wear. So my answer to that was to, because we did 2 shows at a certain point, we did men's and women's wear. My answer to that was actually to create very versatile clothes, clothes in wearability versatile, so clothes that could be snapped off or changed or whatever, and actually just present the exact same collection in menswear and in women's wear, but just style it differently. And nobody really noticed it in the beginning, like really, but it was the exact same jacket, exact same pants, but we just styled them differently. And that's actually because of this necessity, I think we created one of the founding values of the brand, that it's all about versatility and wearability.
It's amazing what you can do with restriction. Diesel, that first film, obviously you were in the constrictions of lockdown, but you produced that incredible fashion film.
I also believe in that, actually. I really believe that restriction pushes creativity, because you have to find an answer. And I think that's we did that with Y Project. With Diesel, of course, also because in detail we had my very first, very complicated situation also, because my first collection at Diesel was in the middle of the pandemic. And of course, Diesel was a bit of a dusty Italian denim brand. Everybody was already like, why is he a Diesel? Like, what is he doing there? I mean, especially because I came from Y Project, which was this kind of little creative gremlin, and then suddenly being in a really big, established, stuffy denim brand. So most people were like, okay, he's doing this for the money, but not true at all. I mean, I really had a passion for Diesel. I really loved Renzo, so it was quite important to make a big statement. You have to catch people, and you have to make sure that, of course, you also talk about all your fundamental values you want to bring back into the brand. So yeah, we did that film with Frank Lebon and Chris Simmons, and basically I think it was a very successful film because we really talked about everything that I wanted Diesel to become. For example, like the very first woman actually the very first silhouette we saw at Diesel was from that film, Ella Schneider, which is a transgender woman. And I thought, okay, this is what I believe society is about. Like we should now be talking about everybody and loving everybody and stop thinking so traditionally like how we used to do. And I thought it was quite a statement that for a male-driven denim brand that, you start with a transgender woman. I think Ella is amazing, she's fantastic, and she, in my opinion, changed a bit of history.
Having that connection to the audience and that interplay has been really key in your communication of Diesel, the runway shows, opening those up to the public, doing raves, inviting students. What's your strategy kind of been to approaching the runway show as a format? Why has that still been an important format for Diesel and how you've used that?
And when I was hired at Diesel, there was no runway show in the contracts. It happens in the process. So obviously, like when we decided to be part of Milan Fashion Week, I was a bit, okay, great, but I don't want to play the game of Bottega and Prada because I'm not Bottega and Prada. They do an amazing job, but they are luxury, they are fashion, and they are perfect where they are. We belong in Milan Fashion Week also because we are having a part of the collection which is fitting into that world, but let's never forget our founding values, which is everybody in democracy. So my challenge to myself every year, and which is very exhausting, is to actually find a way how to bring the exclusivity or that luxury feeling of Fashion Week, but in an alternative, democratic way. There's moments where we find venues and we can open the show to public. It's the easy one, of course, which is lovely, of course, because you can have 10,000 people raving at the Diesel show for free with free drinks, and the kids from all over Italy were coming and they're basically fighting to get in. So it's also really beautiful because, I mean, all those people have never access to shows. You know, like, we always invite to schools. We should always remember that fashion shows are really for the happy few, and I think it's great that also now the students can actually see something more. That's also why, for example, now we are opening all the show preps. So the whole styling, me with my stylist, the whole show preparation is actually live streamed on diesel.com. So you can actually see how we are building that collection. But then there's also other ways of communicating, which when we don't find a venue to open it to public, then we try to do something different. And for example, then we build a massive mountain of like condoms in the middle of the runway, which was actually quite important because the wife of Renzo is the head of the OTB Foundation, which of course talks about which is working on really great social projects. And she brought the attention that HIV is extremely growing with Gen Z, obviously because they are born in the generation of the time after the AIDS pandemic, so they're not really confronted with it. I mean, I was in the 90s very scared of it because I was still part of that whole traumatic experience, but those kids don't really know about it. It's not really their reality, so they're less safe, and HIV is growing there, and not with the grown-ups. So I thought, like, okay, being a brand like Diesel, which is really talking to Gen Z, and we have a lot of Gen Z customers, how can I help also with bringing a bit of awareness? So we did this whole massive set of condoms in collaboration with Durex, and then we actually supported every single of our 450 Diesel stores worldwide with unlimited access to condoms until the end of the year. So everybody could go inside and get their condoms, which is also very great because I remember me at 16 going to buy condoms in a pharmacy. It was like a nightmare, you know. so it was very good I thought it was cute that they can just come into the store and buy and get their condoms. So I think these are all small ways how we try to always have a little bit more of a community approach and really make sure it's very clear that we are a lifestyle brand and a democratic brand, and we talk to everybody, and we want everybody with us.
Let's move away from my project and Diesel for a moment. You were the guest designer for Jean-Paul Gaultier Couture. That must have been a lovely full circle moment for you.
I mean, and again, I think Jean-Paul Gaultier also has a quite similar ethos of joie de vivre, fun. I mean, it was amazing because, I mean, how many creative directors or designers wouldn't dream of receiving the brief from the CEO that there is no budget. You can just do the dress and use as much fabric you want to do and pearls and whatever. So that's really where I kind of reconnected with my inner child, and I was thinking about Cleopatra and whatever and creating really like fairy tale moments. Of course, it is a product, but sometimes it's also there to make people dream, and I think couture is the moment where you can just create a Disneyland. I remember it was a very complicated season in the way that we were just after COVID. So I had my first Y project show after COVID, so people were all very excited to finally see runway shows. The week later, I had my first physical show of Diesel, and the week later, I had my first couture show ever for Jean-Paul Gaultier. So I had like 3 massive shows in 3 weeks' time. I mean, I was also defining the creative direction of Diesel while actually defining the couture collection of Jean-Paul Gaultier. So there was a lot of things happening in the same time. The good thing is, again, that they had a bit of a similar vibe. So I think I had ease to jump into their world.
I mean, it comes back again to that idea of you as this amazing imagination and these stories and these characters. I also wanted to ask you about a magazine curated by and working in that way of putting together a magazine and bringing together your different reference points for a printed publication.
Well, a magazine is a very different exercise because at the end of the day, a magazine is only about my ego. You know, it's just me. With Jean-Paul Gaultier, Diesel and Y Project, it's a lot about what is the brand famous for originally and how to reconnect with it, how to celebrate it, how to respect it, and then, of course, make your own thing out of it. A magazine, it was more like my private diary, to be honest. It's really like, okay, what do I like? But I was really focusing with a magazine, like, okay, what was also my starting point? You know? How should I reconnect with my founding values? And I actually found back like a whole database of the Glenn Martens Bible when I had my own brands, and it was a whole bunch of pictures, like really like for shows, for pictures, for whatever, like all kind of mood boards, which I recommend to every single young designer before they start doing their own brands or whatever. They should really work on their Bible because it's something you will use forever and ever as a tool. Because once you really start working, you just have to follow the industry and you have to be fast, and sometimes you actually lose your connection. So I had that Bible, and I went back to that Bible. And basically, a magazine is a celebration of the Bible. So we shot in Bruges, which of course is very important because I grew up there, with Belgian models. I also wanted to celebrate all my friends, all the people who actually helped me and with who we worked together to create all the crazy things we've been doing. So yeah, it was a bit of honoring my past and my future. It was really cute, yeah. It's really lovely also to have a magazine saying, carte blanche, do whatever you want to do. So very thankful for a magazine.
What does it take to be in fashion today?
It's intense, of course, for sure. It needs to be your passion. And I'm very blessed that I'm obsessed by my job. As a creative director, I can say that, I think I'm quite good as a creative director for this era because it's much more multidimensional. I think maybe 20 years ago, a creative director would create a beautiful artistic collection, they would make a campaign, they would take care of their teams and go to some galas. Now it's all about social media, connections, it's about like communities, it's about, you have to be way more diverse, let's say. You have to talk about social matters, and that is what I really love about it, because I am by nature a person which is very excited, a bit overexcited, and I get easily bored. And I'm also very curious about all different things, and I think, having to play that multiple profile fits me very well, but it can be very exhausting, and I think you have to really be ready for it. Maybe that's also why I want to have the countryside house, the chickens, to be able to like cut off completely and to think about something very different.
Thank you so much for joining us, Martens.
Thank you so much for inviting me.